Hi there. Welcome to Life Between Coasts, the podcast where we dive into our personal journeys connected through synchronicity. So grab your coffee, light a candle, and let's begin. I'm your host, Leah, and we're glad you're here. So this week, I want to celebrate the season's end. We're in episode 26. This is it, the close of season 1. I actually made notes to make sure that I hit all the points that I wanted to talk to you about today. But what a journey this has been. I just want to start out by saying how deeply grateful I am for all listeners in our community, for every single person that tuned in, for every single person that referred our podcast out to the listeners. The path wasn't easy. Before launching this first episode, I know I briefly touched on it, I think, in the episode with Alexis, but it did take over a year to get to this point. Just after the death of my dad, walked into the office and said, I think this is what we need to do. This is what I need to do. And then the planning went into play. And then we built the set. And then we had the trouble with the cameras. And then we had things shut off or mics not work or sound not work. And they say, it usually takes about the first 15 episodes before you really work out all of those kinks. And I have to say that is true. I believe that we've finally have gotten to that point of mastering what we need to do for our production. The biggest problem that I think that I have, and I wanted to let people know on, is I have zero social media presence up until now. I had a Facebook account it was an enigma. It was my middle name and my extended last name, which was a very Polish version before my grandfather had shortened it. And so if you knew me, you really had to know me to know that was me. And usually I would just use it to spy on my family, just to see how the kids were doing and who was graduating, who was pregnant, one of those things. But now, because I started this podcast, I had to reveal myself. I had to come full circle on that and say, no, this is me. I'm Leah. Here I am. And so in June, I finally changed my Facebook to my name. And then everything else is about Life Between Coasts. So again, it's really hard when you have zero following or zero friends on those social media outlets to know where to post, who to post to, what groups to join. It's been a really exciting and interesting educational experience. And Alexis sometimes pulls her hair out, I'm certain, because it takes me a little bit to understand how to gain followings and whether I should boost something or some of that marketing. So I'm so glad that I have the younger version of myself, let's say, teaching me how to use all of that social media. Everything that we've created, everything that we've done here has been through trial and error. So if it works, great. If it doesn't, we move on and redefine what we need to do to get this to happen. And I tell Alexis all of this. I tell her how grateful I am for all of our listeners, for all of our subscribers, for all of our guests. And I tell her how the feedback is when I speak to people out in the public, because everywhere I go, I carry business cards with me. So everywhere I go, I talk about the podcast. I tell people, I try to invite them to become guests. And they seem to be very receptive to the idea of finding unity. And maybe it's just because I'm here in Michigan. Maybe if I ask people in other states, I would be able to find out if they're just as receptive. I see our listeners. I see on some of the reporting and things where people listen. We have a great follower in Germany, and I believe it's one of my tax clients, but I'm so thankful that they're listening. We've had a few hits in Canada and mostly the United States, but I'm just so happy that it's been through multiple states and it's not just here in the Midwest or just here in Michigan. It wouldn't exist. This podcast wouldn't exist if it weren't for the efforts that Alexis has put into it and all of the energy that she's been able to dedicate to this as well. The very first episodes, I want to let you know, while we were recording, we were in the throes of the tax season. So we launched March 26th. Of course, April 15th is our deadline for taxes. So leading up to all of that, all of my nighttime hours or any extra hours that I had, I was putting into this to make sure that we launched on that day. it was stressful. When you process so many tax returns and try to be as receptive and attentive to all of your clients, trying to do this simultaneously was a big leap of faith. Looking back, I've reviewed those episodes, and they're hard. I look tired. You can see I had a lot going on. And they were hard for me because that was the first time in my life that I actually had to become vulnerable. Vulnerable in the sense of telling my story to a complete stranger or an audience or community, to you. You don't know me. And here I am telling you about my family passing away through the years. And I tell you about swallowing a bottle of pills. And I tell you about the ups and downs of my life and where I've been. And it's funny because I present this podcast. I present this to people when I'm out on at a restaurant or a store and talking to a cashier. I tend to start out with the negative. I talk about the hard things that people have gone through and how that they've persevered and how they're thriving and how they have bettered themselves, or how they've grown and how they, from that bad experience, how they have reached the peak of their mountaintop, or that they're striving to get to that point. And I think it's my way of celebrating that person, because I'm forever the optimist. And so I want to make sure that people understand where somebody has come from as I'm delivering that story, or if I'm telling them that. And that's the hardest part when I'm trying to sell or provide information about this, because I don't mean to be negative or sound negative or talk about the dark spot first, because there's so much to celebrate. Each and every single one of our guests, there's so much to celebrate with their story. It's funny. I remember interviewing for my MBA, the one that I wanted to go to Switzerland for, the one I was actually running to. I was running away. That was really what the point was. I was unhappy in my relationship at that time. My dad and I, even though I loved him and had a great relationship, that was the beginning of I became the parent, and I wasn't ready to be the parent. And the Switzerland, doing a 9-month MBA in Switzerland, in Montreux on the water. I mean, come on, who wouldn't want to do that, right? But I remember telling the interviewer, I said, I know I'm going to be part of something big. I just don't know what it is yet. So maybe this is it. My goal might be lofty. It might be extreme, but really, at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. I just want to connect humans again. I've said this many times. I don't care about politics. I care about you, and I care about your story. In fact, last night, amongst my travels between our various locations here, just having to drop things off and do errands and such, I did stop over to a prior interview with Mark, and I stopped at his house. His sister was in town from California, and he really wanted me to meet her. And I said, I don't have much time to sit and stay. I've got so many other things I have to do. But I'm on my way back from Canton. I'm coming back into Ypsilanti. I'm coming in a specific way. I said, I can drive right past your house. I'll just stop over. And he said, okay. So I stopped at his house. I got there about 4:15. And I said, really, I can't stay very long. I've got to go walk the dog. I've got emails. I've got things to do. And he says, oh, have a seat. Do you need anything to drink? I'm like, no, I have a Coke in the car. It's in the car purposely because I didn't plan on staying so long. And I was there for a little over 3 hours. I sat at his kitchen table with him and his sister, and we just sat and we talked about everything and nothing. It was like one of those weird situations where you just don't want to leave because you're going to miss something. And you don't find yourself in those situations very often. But the thing that I got from him yesterday was how very clear he is about the end of his life. He's doing treatment, right? We've talked about that on our podcast. We talked with him about that. But how part of our conversation, he just says, when I die, this, or when I die, make sure this happens. And so the fact that he is focusing on that end game means that the time in between that he has left before that end time, date, whenever it might be, he has to be present. He has to do what he can do to enjoy and be part of his family with his friends. It's really a hard thing to imagine when you're not facing that. He knows that he has cancer inside his body. So he knows there's an end date if it doesn't improve, or if they can't get rid of it, or if they can't do surgery. But for those of us that don't know when that end date might be, it's just very surreal to sit there and listen to somebody talk about that. It's a very real feeling that comes through. Now, of course, all of this hasn't been smooth sailing. When I invite people to be on the show, I'm a natural salesperson, and that definitely kicks in. I get caught up in the excitement of telling people about how I want to save humanity and how I want to bring people together and unite them. And, everybody needs to know that we're here for each other. And it's such a big thing in my heart that I get so excited that when I ask people to be on the show, I get them so excited that they want to be on the show that they can't tell me no, or they feel they can't tell me no. Some people aren't comfortable talking about themselves. They're not comfortable about having a camera on them. Believe me, if you look at the first few episodes, I wasn't comfortable with that either. Much better now. Still learning a little bit. But it is hard. It is hard to sit down. Even though the cameras and the mics disappear when you're talking, it's hard just to take a seat. And, it's episode 12, for instance. I had to do a recap because 2 days prior to that, I had bent over to scoop up Jasper off the floor, and he twisted and I twisted, and oh gosh, the back, the torturous back injury that 16-pound cat caused me was a little bit more than I could bear. So I'm at the urgent care the day before, get a shot in my my glutes to try to relieve the inflammation. They pump me up, I should say, full of prednisone. And then I was sitting here so uncomfortable I could barely move. But the show had to go on. We have a commitment. So we had to make sure. I couldn't find somebody or willingly, put somebody on the last minute, because I didn't expect for that to happen. I didn't expect to throw my back out in the middle of the season. Looking at my notes here, realize that there's so many things that I have to say. And so many more people that we want to talk to. And even those people that have declined, that have scheduled to come on and backed out, it's disappointing. Don't get me wrong. It stings. But again, the show must go on. And I always have been able to figure out something to be able to put into that place. That's actually how Alexis got her interview. That's how Mark ended up with his interview. That's how the two travel videos, I was intending for those to be part of season 2. But because of cancellations, they became part of season 1. And actually, I'm so happy that they were part of season 1, both Diana and Carol, because it was showing that we are able to do this on the road, that we can take this to other places, and that we could go meet other people in other states or other parts of our state, or other parts of our country and elsewhere. And so that was the first test, and we were successful. So you have to understand there's so many moving parts with this podcast, and there's so many different avenues that we want to take it. It's hard when something doesn't line up perfectly or how you plan for it. But as long as we're able to improvise, adapt, and overcome, then we keep moving forward. And so it's okay that you canceled. I understand. I'm not bitter. You're still my people. So I'm not going to hold it against you. But I just, if I come to you and I say, hey, do you want to be on my show? Just say no if you don't want to. That's the best thing, because in my mind, I'll build it up. And then when you call on the day of, and I'm expecting you and I'm here and I'm waiting for you and nobody's here, that's the more disappointing part. Because the first season, we've had to film everything in an on-demand way. Everything has been film, post, film, post. And so we really haven't had a bank of interviews that we've been able to pull from. And so that's why we're having seasons. Season 1, right now, we're ending this week, and we'll be just a short hiatus, about 10 weeks or so, strictly just to be able to take the time just to bank those interviews. Because come January 1st, by January 7th, I'm going to have my tax office back open, and I guarantee that I'm not going to be able to do this on a weekly basis without looking as tired as I did in episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. At least episode 7 with Shep, I was just outside of tax season, a little bit tired, but, at least I didn't have, 100 clients coming in the door in the last few days of the tax season. I started this thinking that I had to be a certain way. And it was with the interview with Arius that's when it kind of opened up for me. It's the box. It's the being in the box and having to be a certain way. And that's why I didn't watch a podcast before I started this, because I didn't want to mimic anyone's style. I didn't want to be compared to somebody else. I wanted to be me, just Leah. That's what I say, right? Just me. And I wanted to make sure that all the messages and all of the interviews and everything that we put out there is something that you want to hear. Going back to about those cancellations, last thing I'm going to say about this, I had two, the last couple, Carol and Rand, actually, both of them. Carol sent me a text after she watched her video, and she said, I watched myself today. It was better than I thought. Thank you for asking me to participate. Rand told my mister that he thought about calling me and telling me that he didn't want to do it, but then he found that he enjoyed the experience too. He was ready to do another one. I think as humans, again, going back to building this up in our head, some of it's the sales pitch. I act like I have a grandiose plan, but really we're making it up as we go along. That's the beauty of this. We have full control of everything that we do, mostly. But reaching episode 26 is no small feat for me. The statistics show that only 90% of podcasts get past episode 3, and only 10% of those only 10% of the remaining reach episode 20. So now we're at 26. So it just highlights how much dedication and persistence that we have in pursuing this mission and this purpose of bringing people together. The season hasn't just been about my guests. It's also been about me. The hard parts, the good parts, the sad parts, the joy. I talked about my dad. Our relationship was complicated, and I won't pretend otherwise. I'm glad he was my dad, though. I wouldn't have him any other way. Whenever anyone would ask me, say I was in Lake Orion and I was at out and I ran into somebody that knew him, or at a family gathering, oh, how's your dad? How's Uncle Dave? How's Canine? It's like, oh, he's my dad. Shrug my shoulders. And they would understand. They just knew what that meant. And I didn't have to explain my relationship or the complications or anything else that we were going through at that moment. And I think that was important to me, because I don't think I was ready to expand or expound upon any of those frustrations or internal struggles I was having with him. And then there's the relationship, of course, with my mister. We just celebrated 17 years of, as I call it, unwedded bliss. But it hasn't always been bliss. It's been 17 years of working hard for each other. And that's the key, is working hard for each other. Even in the moments that we didn't like each other. We argue more about business than we do in our personal life. But that being said, I think as I've always said, you have to be able to feel all of those feelings. You have to, the love, the hate, the anger, the sadness, the joy, the happiness, all of those feelings have to be felt to be able to say, yes, the person that I'm with is truly my partner. It's hard though, because the podcast, he doesn't quite understand everything that goes into it, the time and the fact that I'm not earning an income from this. This is a passion, and he's not necessarily been one that understands the passion side of it. I mean, he's not very creative either. He is to a certain extent. He's a business guy though, but he's very a personality, and it's hard to get him to understand what this realm is all about. So there's some strains, there's some, growing pains. There's some, he feels like I'm pulling away when I'm thinking that I'm spreading my wings, that I'm doing this for healing, that I'm doing this to bring people together. And so there's been some friction, some struggles. And one of the big things is that everything that we've done in the last 17 years has always been together. We've worked together, shoulder to shoulder, side by side. We've helped each other, whether it be real estate or in the construction business or anything that we've done. I help him with other things that he does, and he helps me just using his brain for a lot of things because he's quite intelligent as well. And so when I started this podcast, even though he's part of it, he's not part of it. I told him, he's not allowed to be interviewed. He's not allowed to be part of it. I don't need a say. I just didn't want his involvement in any of that. And so I think he feels disconnected from what I'm doing here. And that has kind of set him into a mindset, like I said, like I'm pulling away instead of spreading my wings. But the big thing is to know that we still are getting those confirmations, that the universe is still making sure that we know that we are in the right place at the right time. You see, I was up north. We were scheduling, or we were recording with Diana and Carol. And over the last few weeks, many of those universe winks became evident. I came home on a Wednesday, and the next day was our anniversary. He had purchased roses and a card already in advance. And so he says to me, well, they only sold them in 6 or 12, so you have 18 roses. So one's from the boys, meaning Monty and Jasper. And I said, okay. And then I went to get my vase, and I started to get things together. I laid the roses down on the counter. I opened up the packaging, and I lifted up the roses so I could trim the ends to place in the vase. When I did that, one of the rose buds fell off. So in fact, he did buy me 18 roses, but 17 only remained long stemmed. He didn't know that one was broken, and I found it just a little wink to say, here you go. I took care of that for you. The same day, I was doing some real estate showings, and I had to get some gas. So I was pumping gas, and for some odd reason, I'm like, oh, today's my lucky day. We're gonna do a deal on this house. So I put $26 in, just thinking that, hey, if my dad's using it, why can't I? After the $26 entered, after I finished pumping, the gallons that were on there were 6.321, and the 63 and the 21 are both numbers that are significant to my mister. So both of those, again, my 26 created that 63 and 21. And then a few days, about a week or so later, probably, so this is Thursday, so this is probably about 10 days later, Lauren, he was working on some property. He has some recreational land, and he... And I'm going to say this. I'm going to tell you the absolute truth about how I got to laugh, because I let me play this out for you. So it's about a 35-minute drive home from where he was at. He always calls me to tell me he's on the way. So if I'm starting dinner, if I'm doing something, I have a heads up. He didn't call me. I was working in the yard. I was doing some leaves, cutting some branches and things, and not really paying attention to what he was, not calling me or whatever. But he shows up in the driveway, and he comes in and his shirt covered in blood. And he's holding his hand. And he had gotten in a fight with some hedge trimmers, basically. So they came down and they clipped his ring finger. So he got 2 slices from some electric hedge trimmers in his finger. And he was looking for sympathy or empathy. And instead, I was so angry with him because in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, it's a nice night. He'll come home. We'll do a little fire in the backyard. We'll grill out some steaks. Everything will be just fine. And all I see is this, bloody shirt and him holding and telling me how he did that. And I looked at him and I said, what did you do to cause it? I was so mad that he ruined the night. That was my thing. I'm like, you ruined it. Why would you do this? And I was furious with him. And he said, I need you to help me unload the mower because it's this big brush hog, mower. And I'm like, no, I'm not helping you. And I'm not taking you to the emergency room. You need stitches. You have to go on your own. So he proceeded to unload the vehicle and went to the ER. Left the ER, went to the urgent care, and got a couple stitches and came home. And I was a little bit softer on him when he came home, made him something to eat, and just was still a little bit frustrated now that he has ruined this perfectly fine Saturday night. And this isn't the first time something like this has happened, so pardon my expression of anger towards him. And so he finally admits after he comes home, and he says, yeah, so I had the hedge trimmers in my hand. I knew the loppers were about 100 yards away at the end of the trail. And, I knew that branch was just a little too big to use those trimmers. But hey, I didn't want to walk that 100 yards, so I was going to do it anyway. And that's what he did. He did that, slipped, hit his finger. So he caused the event and fully did admit to it. And so we do laugh. But here's the kicker part of this. That following Tuesday, those same roses that he bought me now were wilted, and so I was disposing of them. And I pulled the trash bin from the house and I carried it outside because it was trash day. And I set the bag in the bin, and the neighbor was walking by. I waved and turned to him as I was going back to readjust it. And as I readjusted that bag, it sliced my thumb, in a bad way, and it was gushing blood and everything. So that was karma's way of saying, hey, you should be nice. You should be nice. My mister, we talk about, how the universe has played effects on our life and how we see those connections. And he starts to see those same connections. He has said, though, that I've changed since my father passed away. But he's right. I have changed. This has changed me. This is giving me more confidence, more feeling that I have ability, feeling that I can come out of my shell. The last 4 years kind of closed it up in that shell, basically in my bedroom for the last 4 years, except for the time that I was in the tax office. I didn't leave or go places. Lyme disease is the worst, I gotta say. I mean, I've been clean of medication for a little time now. I am starting to see some other effects that happen. Got some brain stuff that's going on. It's a really, and I'm going to use the word surreal again, place to be, because it's hard to describe, but the best description I have is it's a laissez-faire kind of feeling, like, oh yeah, everything will work out. I don't have to interfere. Yeah, it'll all work out. Don't worry. Coupled with a lack of comprehension of the lapse of time. So if I talked to somebody 3 weeks ago and I said, oh yeah, I'll get with you next week, and a month passes and I call them, I don't realize it's been a month. It doesn't feel like a month to me. It's like I just talked to that person yesterday. So there's no concept of urgency going on in me right now. And that's always, especially when you work in businesses with deadlines, that's always a concern. So, of course, that's where referrals to neurologists and hopefully some scans or some things can tell me. The problem was that the Lyme disease got so deep into my system that the first treatment has brought me to probably 85-90% better, and I still hold by that. And I couldn't put my finger on it a couple months ago, but I did feel that some changes were happening. So I think the best thing to do is say, more research, more consultations, and let's see where this takes us. And I know that even though he doesn't grasp or understand that it wasn't solely my father that changed me, that it was mostly the Lyme disease, that he'll be by my side the entire time as we're investigating this. And I'm still absolutely astonished that something the size of a sesame seed can cause so much destruction within a human system. Um, and, moving forward, just some of the things that we talked about in the season, it's just, I'm astonished again. And I've noticed this specifically with some of the guests and on how deeply personal that they've gotten, that they've shared their stories. Um, it's hard to talk about yourself. It really is. Every guest that comes in here is a bit nervous. And I have a little bit of a psychological effect that I do. And I'm going to give away my position here and explain. So when I bring people in to have a conversation with me, I have them sit down on the couch and we sit and we chat. And we do that for probably about 15 minutes, even before we start recording. Because once they get comfortable in this space, they feel like they're just sitting in my living room. And that's the way it should be. All I'm looking for is a conversation at the end of the day. They start to overthink sometimes. You can see it in their face. So if you watch some of the episodes, especially when we first open, when I say, today we sit down with, and then I present and I give them a little snippet and say, tell us about you. You can kind of see like they're grasping a little bit at straws and they're like, what do I say or how do I do it? Am I doing it right? What if I say something wrong? What if it's one of those. And then, so I let them open that and you can see where they get that nervousness and then they feel like they're saying too much. So then we can step in and just redirect and guide that conversation. Because the whole point of this is not me necessarily asking questions like an interviewer, but it's more about just having a conversation. And if somebody talks about something, asking more about that thing that they want to talk about. You don't have to talk about every bit of your life. You don't have to talk about all the bad things or all the good things. You can talk about one chapter. You can talk about one season. You can talk about how one person affected your life and brought you to where you are. Being vulnerable, being honest, and sharing your story is hard. And it's a privilege that so many people have trusted us with the gift of their story. And I've been told by nearly everyone who has started to listen to this podcast that episode 1 is very difficult to listen to. Now, not difficult because the sound is bad or the video sucks or anything of that effect, but it's because of the topic. It's because of the story. It's because where I declare and tell you how I found out how my mom was diagnosed with cancer, how my dad I was bringing home, but died that weekend, and how I lost my brother when I was young, and how all of these bad things can happen, and how I'm a soul survivor. But the key of that is I'm a survivor. I'm here. I'm present. I am so happy to be here and be present with you. The raw details that come out in that episode, it might take somebody a few plays to get through, especially if they've not ever felt that. They're hearing this. They're feeling this from my point of view, from the way that I experienced that. And with that in their brain, or as they're hearing my story, it can be very difficult. And especially if you knew the people. I mean, if you're my family and you're listening to how I found out my mom had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, that's a gut punch because you knew my mom. And if you worked with her, she was like a second mom to you too. And she loved people and she loved to help people. And it was so sad that she was cut such short in life, but that's okay. That was what her destiny was meant to be. There's a common practice among podcasters to delete early episodes. Um, this you can't, because you can't delete your life. This represents the journey, the growth, the experiences that one person might have. This is my life. And then talking to our guests. Each one added a layer of depth, honesty, and synchronicity to this season. Just a couple quick points, of the guests that we had on. Jerry Lynn and Kendall, having them on the show was extremely important to me. Jerry Lynn, I always declare, is my only friend. So it touches me that she and Kendall decided to come on together. It also touches me that they talked about such a deep subject with the addiction, self-harm, and the healing. And the healing part is so important because it shows that once you communicate with somebody and once you are able to open up and share parts of yourself and your story, that there are other people out there that can help you. You don't have to go through all of this alone. I do want to remind people to remember to give grace. Because what Jerry Lynn was going through and what Kendall was going through and what they were going through together, she didn't expose that to the open market until sitting down on the couch. That was a family issue. People hide behind the curtains, close the curtains on your windows, and they don't share bits of pieces of life like that. So when you're at the cash register, or you are at the bank, or you are just dealing with somebody, just remember you don't know what they're going through as you're interacting with them. So be kind. Say please. Say thank you. We're human. No one is perfect. The connection that was created through TJ was Antonio, or Queso Tone, or Tone. What? Did I say that right? I'm excited to see how his next chapter will read. Antonio is collaborating with us to create music for the next episode, or for the next season. So a new intro and outro that will be specifically connecting us to him. And I think that is more meaningful than anything in its own. But also that he is creating for us to reflect the stories and everything that comes through this moment that we have with each of our guests. Another side note on that, I have a tax client that I work with, and he has a nephew, his great nephew actually, 17 years old, just lost his mother. Similar situation to it, or similar time frame of Antonio. Just enrolled and moved into the dorms at EMU, or Eastern. And so I looked at my client and I said, let me see if I can have a friend reach out to him. So I was able to connect these two, and hopefully he can mentor him or introduce him to people that can mentor him, maybe through the Formula 734. But this is how these connections and relationships. So I didn't know Antonio until TJ introduced me to him. But after hearing Antonio's story, I was able to help this other client because he has a great nephew that is in the same situation. And his biggest concern was that he didn't want somebody to look to his nephew and say, be the man, toughen up, suck it up, push it down. He wants him to be able to feel those emotions of the loss of his mother. He wants to be able to make sure that he can process through what grief truly is, because he knows from his own experience what addiction can do. And he doesn't want his great nephew to replace that feeling of grief by taking a drink or doing a drug. He would rather him talk out loud about what he feels and to go through those emotions. And what's better to do that with than somebody that's been there? That's what this is about, connecting humans. my cousin Kelly having the courage to finally get here. That was a big thing. It's been a long time since we had a one-on-one, reminiscing about our family, our journeys, trusting the forces around us and guiding us. It's funny how she confirmed my mother was strict. Some of my other cousins used to refer to her as a Sarge. She had no military experience, but just the perfect stare that could move mountains. And Diana, I just have to say one thing about her. For all the time that I've known you, I've always thought your name was Diane. It's my dad's fault. He would always say Larry and Diane and break into the song Jack and Diane. It's been drilled into my head that way. So when I introduced you as Diane, just know, it doesn't matter what your name is. I'm so happy that you're part of my life. And all of these conversations woven together have given season 1 its heartbeat. And then there's the Anthem Project. The idea grew out of wanting to unite people again, bringing people together through music. How many people have sat on the couch and said landslide? I've had at least 3. Landslide is being a song that speaks to them. Lyrics. What's your song? I need you to go to our YouTube page, to our channel, and go to the Anthem Project and add your song. Email us, realpeople@lifebetweencoasts.com. Tell us what your anthem is. We'll add it. Post a comment on any of our videos. Post a comment on any of our social medias. We will add your song to be part of this. Because if you can connect through music, then, that's the first part of the foundation that brings us together. Just little things. Little things, really, right? Remember that personal anthem is the song that hits differently. The song that lifts you up, centers you, or speaks your truth. It might be for the chapter, it might be for a season, or it might be lifelong. But just add your song, be part of something. And this is what I want you to be part of. But this isn't the end, not even close. Season 2 is already in motion, and I can tell you that this season is going to be better than the last. I'm pulling back more layers, leaning into more stories, and widening the circle of voices that you'll hear. One of those layers is my own story. So one of the stories, I'm not certain if I said somewhere along the way, but my dad was adopted. About a month, 6 weeks or so before I had him give his samples to 23andMe and Ancestry. We sent out the samples, didn't know what the results were going to be. And the 23andMe results came back in on the day that he died. A few weeks later, the Ancestry came in. The 23andMe showed that he had a half brother and that there were lots of cousins. And it showed some areas that family would come from. A couple of people have reached out. One on the Ancestry, they reached out a couple times because they didn't know he existed as part of their family. So they were curious. His adoption was sealed, so I actually have to go to court, I think, to unseal it to find out any information. But what this has created was that there's a DNA family out there that I didn't know existed. So part of that connection, we had started talking. Of course, I didn't really keep up in communication, and it was about a year since we'd last reached out. And so about a week ago, I messaged the people that had reached out to me, and I said, I apologize that I didn't stay in contact. I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of information. All I had was his mom's name. That was it. But I have a podcast. I would be so happy to meet you. And I think that this would just be able to open a door to another chapter that I never knew existed again. And so that at least one person has since accepted. And so she's coming in a couple weeks, and I'm going to sit down and we're going to have an interview, and we're going to meet part of my DNA family. We'll find out where that goes. And I can't forget to mention something about my Dave Portnoy mission. If you've been following on my social media, specifically Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, you've probably seen my posts and playful attempts to get his attention. Some people might see it as a shameless promotion, but I see it as synchronicity. So there's a lot of things that have come together from a synchronous point of view. And so my neighbor, and this shared wall right here is a pizza place. The owner's been in business for over 50 years. He's got a good pizza. And so my ploy for Portnoy, I should say, is that he's a media company and he's a pizza connoisseur. So why not get him next door to the pizza and then talk to him about the podcast? So again, shameless self-promotion. He's a graduate of U of M, so it's only 6 miles from the big house. And I expect him at least to know that he'll be there for the Michigan-Ohio State game, because who's going to miss that? And I hope that he'll be here maybe for another game before then. And if we can, it would be great to be able to get this to come to fruition. Plus, the owner's son looks like him, so there's a doppelganger effect as well. I don't want to spoil too much more now, but if season 1 was about finding my footing, season 2 is about spreading our reach further. This little break, like I said, gives me the chance to bank some interviews. And by doing that, we'll be able to engage with more people, do some more shameless self-promotion, and get more people to listen and hear us. Because the more people that we can bring in, the more people that we can learn from, that we can hear their stories and how they survive, how they live, how they achieve and thrive. And that's what is so important with us right now. In the meantime, this is where you come in. If you've enjoyed season 1, please stay connected. I need you to subscribe to all of our social accounts: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and X. Share episodes with your friends. Again, comment on those posts. Let us know what stories resonated with you most. We're going to interact right back with you. If you make a comment, either myself or Alexis will respond. We will acknowledge that you are talking to us. And if you've been moved by the Anthem Project, add your voice, bring your song, add more comments, again, just tell people about it. Let's bring it together. I have seen at least, I'm going to say half a dozen times that in the last 3 months where it's been posted as a question to numerous people. Jennifer Gardner, I've seen it on a couple other news shows where questions are posted and they say, what's your song? What's your go-to song? And so I know this is a big thing that connects a lot of people. So again, get that Anthem Project out there. Let's see how many people we can get to join it. You can also visit us anytime on the website, lifebetweencoasts.com. That's where you're going to find all the episodes, all the updates, and more ways to get involved. I'm excited, nervous, hopeful, and ready. But most of all, I'm grateful for you, for this community, and for what's still to come. On November 26th, just in time for the holidays, season 2 will come to life. Remember to take care of yourselves, notice the synchronicities, and never underestimate the power of your own story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that we can continue to grow this community. Every click, every share, every comment really does make a difference. And if you've missed any part of season 1, now is the perfect time to go back and listen to them. Each episode holds something unique: laughter, heartache, synchronicities, and wisdom, all of which deserve to be heard. So while we prepare for season 2, I invite you to dive back into season 1 and see how far we've come together. Thank you again for joining us on this week's episode of Life Between Coasts. I am your host, Leah, and until then, bye-bye.